Well, for the next few segments, our legal panel is going to be here to discuss several stories in the news. Let's start off by introducing the attorneys, all via Zoom. Starting at the top, Mayo Bartlett, attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett PLLC. He's also former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office. Jim Kousouros, criminal defense attorney in Manhattan, who sits on the board of directors at the New York Criminal Bar Association, also frequently lecturing at the New York Law School, as well as the bar associations in Queens and New York City. Doug von Oiste, founding partner of Carson von Oiste, focusing on corporate misconduct, and also selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the country. All right, let's start off, guys, with the case against Ghislaine Maxwell. She, the longtime associate of Jeffrey Epstein, who is now finding herself behind bars, all accused of helping Epstein sexually abuse young girls.
This morning, British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell waking up in the notorious Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. A stark contrast from this lavish 156-acre property in New Hampshire where she was arrested last week. In 2019, a former warden of the prison told the New York Times the MDC was one of the most troubled, if not the most troubled facility in the Bureau of Prisons.
Other than, trying to stay below the radar, she had a lot of freedom. Now she has no freedom. Now she's going to be told when to get up, when to go to sleep.
Maxwell is the alleged co-conspirator and ex-girlfriend of Jeffrey Epstein, charged with helping him recruit, groom, and ultimately abuse 3 unnamed teenage victims in the mid-90s. Maxwell now behind bars, just across the East River from the Manhattan jail cell where Epstein was found dead more than a year ago. He was awaiting trial on federal charges, accused of sexually abusing dozens of underage girls. His suicide sparking harsh criticism of the facility he was in.
We are now learning of serious irregularities at this facility that are deeply concerning and demand a thorough investigation.
The guards on duty the night Epstein died were supposed to check on Epstein every 30 minutes, but did not in the hours before he was discovered. Those guards now awaiting trial on charges of falsifying records and conspiracy.
It's going to be very, very strict for her. After what happened with Jeffrey Epstein, they're going to be keeping an eye on her. They're going to be following every rule, every procedure. They're going to make sure, of course, no one can get to her.
So Epstein was, of course, tied to many very rich and powerful people, including Donald Trump. The president says they hadn't even spoken in 15 years, but this video taken in Mar-a-Lago in '92 shows Trump and Epstein yucking it up and commenting on women. Prince Andrew, the second son of the Queen, being investigated by the FBI. A picture of the prince posing one of Epstein's victims. It has resurfaced, but Andrew says he doesn't remember taking it or the girl in the photograph. By the way, that shot was reportedly taken in 2001, so it's well after the window where Maxwell is facing charges for. And then there's Bill Clinton. Clinton had taken trips on Epstein's private jet after he was president, and Clinton had been a guest at Epstein's home in New York, but Clinton's people say they hadn't seen each other in at least a decade at the time of Epstein's death. And now Maxwell reportedly ready to dish. And when it comes to some of the bold-faced names that I listed there, all in order to try and save herself. So as I say, stay tuned. All right. Jimmy, let me start with you. When we come around the table, it's you and I against these two conspiracy nuts in the quad box here. But I got to admit, it doesn't pass the smell test. Let's start first with Epstein, that this guy was left unattended. Obviously, he was a huge player that from the top levels of the Justice Department, they wouldn't make sure this guy would make trial. Now the cameras didn't work here. Nobody knew, nobody did tour to see that the guy was safe and sound. So before we even get to Maxwell, and after, we looked at the coroner's report, is it safe to say you don't have to have a tinfoil hat to say it smells fishy?
Look, when you look at all of those facts, you can say it smells fishy. In 33 years, I have been to the MCC hundreds of times. I've been up to that unit. This is not the modicum of technology that people are thinking about. These guards at the MCC, sometimes they're working, 12, 18, 24 hours, double shifts. But yeah, listen, as you put all of the facts together, it does smell fishy. The allegation of falsifying reports, I've represented guards before. There have been previous allegations some founded that when they don't follow the rules, they don't necessarily put in their reports that they didn't follow the rules.
And Doug, let's talk about Ms. Maxwell. You looked at the charging document and you say to those who say, my God, for a guy like Epstein who recorded apparently everything and even reportedly used it for extortion, and the names we were talking about, get ready for the sparks to fly. But the years that they're looking at her, they're not in the window of time that maybe some of these folks that are connected to it maybe have something to fear. Do I have it right?
Yeah, I mean, the charging document as it exists now, it's my understanding it covers the years 1994 to 97. And I also understand that to be when the inception of this sort of scheme took place. But the really thing that's shocking, it's glaring about, and by the way, the charging document can be amended if new charges come up. But the thing that's really shocking is that they're talking about individuals, but they're not talking about why he was actually doing all this. And if you mentioned conspiracy before this, you're talking about two people who they're painting it just as two sort of people that were pedophiles and they were dealing with very rich and powerful men. The real question that everyone should probably be asking is, why were these people doing this with two rich and powerful men? Maybe that's the wrong way of phrasing it, but there's something else going on here that they were doing. There's some other conspiracy or scheme that's going on that's not addressed in that charging document.
Well, let me get to the timing of that, Mayo, because I mentioned some names. There's a lot of others apparently also that either befriended Jeffrey Epstein or were in his audience right now. And again, we said it's an open secret. He had a proclivity for hidden cameras everywhere. Should people be very scared right now beyond Ms. Maxwell, especially since apparently she's willing to deal? And also, the other coincidence or lack thereof is there used to be a different head of the Southern District of New York just a few weeks ago. Mr. Berman's no longer there. Do those two have anything to do with each other?
Well, they may. It would be speculation, but it's certainly within the realm of possibility that they do have something to do with one another. But I think that anybody who's involved for a number of reasons should be concerned. And one of which is that even if it's outside of the statute of limitations federally, it would not necessarily be outside the statute of limitations in a state prosecution. So there is no statute of limitations for rape. And the other thing is that civilly, you would also likely face tolling statutes, which would allow civil cases to move forward. And if that were to happen, then in addition to anything that any of these individuals directly face themselves, they'd be subject to being deposed.
Rich, I just addressing Doug's point, it may be a lot simpler. I mean, people who do things like this and they have powerful people around them, they could be videotaping these things really just to protect themselves in the event they get in trouble. I mean, you look at what happened in Florida when Epstein got arrested. Somehow, some way, a slam dunk case turned into a misdemeanor, and nothing happened.
As they say, stay tuned. All right, now, when we come back, the guys are going to get into an issue that we're seeing popping up in a lot of major American cities. New York, Chicago, and others, seeing a big spike in violent crime. The question is, why? What's causing it? Many theories out there. We'll discuss and debate them after the break.